what do you think the Jacksonville Jaguars need to do to improve for 2023?
So there's a couple things. I'm mostly going to predicate them on the offensive side of the ball. I'll give Kevin plenty to talk about the defense because I know he's got a lot to talk about on that side of Jacksonville as a team. Um, Number one with me is I want to see Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson be able to maintain their chemistry and be able to bolster and improve it going into year two as a quarterback coach duo. Because, Kev, let's face it, Trevor Lawrence had a massive jump in his second year as a quarterback compared to his rookie year. You could just tell that the offense was running more fluidly. It seemed like he had more confidence. Granted, turnovers were still an issue. Obviously, we remember that Chargers game in the wild card round where he threw 4 interceptions in the first half. It just looked like the lights were too bright for him. And then he had this massive comeback in the second half and got the Jaguars a win over the Chargers to advance to the divisional round. And to me, that really showed the fact that, Trevor had confidence in himself, but it also showed me that Doug Peterson had confidence in his quarterback to be able to make the plays that needed to be made and put the Jags in a position to win that game. So the way that I see it is the fact that the Jags made the playoffs this year already proves to me that Doug Peterson is miles better than what Urban Meyer was as their head coach. And as far as I see it, if Doug Peterson is able to still effectively lead the offense and really continue to improve the chemistry that he has with Trevor Lawrence at that quarterback spot, I think the chemistry between those two will improve over time, and I think will only get better as the years goes on, as long as the Jags remain successful as a franchise. So to me, that's one area where I want to see the Jags just focus on in the offseason. I know it doesn't get a lot of attention, but that quarterback coach relationship needs to be on point, and I think where it stands right now, it's off to a good start, and I think it will get better as time goes along. Number 2 is trying to bring back Evan Ingram into the fold. I thought Evan Ingram was one of the best performing tight ends in the NFL last year, and the numbers indicate that. Evan Ingram had his best year statistically in his career. And granted, he had some good years when he was a member of the New York Giants before coming to the Jags. But when you look at him, he had 98 targets. He had over 60 catches, had around 750 yards receiving, and had a couple touchdowns to go along with it. And, the way that I see it with the Jags offense is that their wide receiving core is pretty decent. And you could tell that Trevor's been able to establish good chemistry with the wide receiving core that he has at his disposal. But I think having that option with Evan Ingram in the fold, I think it will really keep that offense fluid. And to me, I think it bolsters the offense significantly to have Evan Ingram in the fold. And if they weren't unable to, unfortunately, keep him in the fold, if he were to go to another team because he is a free agent this offseason, obviously that would be a big area of need this offseason. And obviously I think the Jags would try to remedy that situation fairly quickly. But if they're able to keep Evan Ingram in the fold and sign him to a multi-year deal, man, I think that Jags offense would be able to flourish very similar to what we saw last year in some games. And I think that Evan Ingram could even top his statistical performance from this last year as well, which would be quite impressive. So for me, I would simply just limit it to improve and bolster the quarterback coach relationship in Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson, and try to bring back Evan Ingram into the fold for a multi-year deal. So Kev, I'll let you take the floor from here.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle focused on the offense, like he said. I'm going to kind of take this from a defensive perspective. Just to kind of give 2 quick points here, I think that they need to bolster the defensive line. They were, I believe, of course, now that is going to be gone. Wait, hold on 1 second. They were 27th in total defense allowed. They only had 35 sacks, which was 25th in the NFL. And when it comes to pressuring the quarterback, they just were not consistent enough to go out there and make plays and create turnovers, which kind of goes into my next subject. And that is going to be the next position I think they are going to need help with is going to be some secondary help, specifically in the cornerback department. They were 5th worst in total yards allowed, and I believe they allowed over 4,000 yards. Kyle, you had the number in front of you, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember what it was, but
I
We're
can pull it
talking
up.
four,
I can pull it up if you want
yeah,
me to.
yeah,
So
please.
So for the amount of passing yards that the Jaguars gave up, they were the fifth worst passing defense in the NFL. They gave up 4,055 yards. The only teams that were worse were the Raiders, the Lions, the Vikings, and the Titans.
That is not the company you want to be attached to, even remotely. So, for a playoff team, this is pretty embarrassing. We knew that the Vikings had a horrible defense. They're one of the worst statistical defensive teams we've seen in a long time. But for Jacksonville to have been as good as they were in the second half against the Chargers, but on paper, you can see that they just were not that kind of team. You're going to need to revamp that defense. You know what you have on the offensive side with Trevor Lawrence, ETN, Peterson leading the way at the head coaching position. But when you look at that defense, you are going to need some depth rushing at rushing the passer, and you are going to need some depth at protecting the outsides and making sure that you are not only getting to the quarterback but creating turnovers, and those turnovers are going to have to be led by some corners in the secondary.